Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome to the video. Welcome to my garage. In today's video, we're going to be making a fiberglass panel for the footwell area. I don't know exactly what you would call this, but we're going to make one for this side and we're going to make one for the other side. So I'm gearing up to start making the fiberglass doors for the Wratchet chassis and the fiberglass panels, quarter panels, whatever you want to call those. And I'm going to make those just like I did the roof by kind of using the panels on Mahler here to start making the mold. I'll have to make some modifications to them, but you know, I'll cross that bridge when I get there. But in order to do that, I'm going to probably use polyester resin rather than epoxy resin. I used epoxy resin when I made the roof here, and that was basically because polyester resin is what I have some experience with, and I had never used the polyester, so I stuck with the epoxy. But the epoxy, I think, is a little bit more difficult to work with, maybe, and it's more expensive. So I want to experiment with some of the polyester, and before I start the larger task of doing the doors and the quarters, I figured I would just make some panels here out of the polyester to kind of sink my teeth into it and get a little bit of experience before I just go straight to some body panels. So what I'm going to do for these panels is I'm actually just going to make some raw fiberglass panels by laying out gel coat and resin on some plastic sheets, and then I'm just going to take those plastic panels and trim them to cut in here and then put in some fender washers to hold them in place. Okay, so like I said, this time I'm using polyester resin, polyester gel coat. The gel coat I used last time was also polyester, but I'm going to be using black gel coat here because I don't think these panels will be painted at all. I've got 8-ounce chopped strand right here. This is all I'm going to do, and I'm only going to do one layer because this really doesn't need to be very thick or strong. It's really just blocking off that portion of the chassis. So I'm going to do, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to wax the plastic with this Partol paste. I'm going to put the wax on once. I'm not going to buff it off. The instructions say to buff it off and do 3 coats, but everything that I've heard and read says to just put 1 layer on and don't buff it off, so I'm going to do that. I'm not going to use any PLA this time because, number one, some people said I don't need that as long as I've got enough wax on here, and secondly, what I'm putting this all on to make these fiberglass panels is already plastic, so that's already slippery enough, so I'm going to skip the PVA process on this round. Then I'm going to do 2 layers of black gel coat mixed at 1% because it's kind of a warmer day. And then once I have the 2 layers of gel coat on, I'm going to do 1 layer of the polyester resin with the 8-ounce chopped strand mat. And then because I don't have any wax additive for the polyester resin, once this gets tacky, then I'll just spray a little bit of PVA over that just to seal it from the outside air. And then it should seal up nice and tight. And then we'll take a look and see what we have. I want to point out a couple things to you guys that I'm doing this time that is making things a lot easier. Number one, for this gel coat and for the resin, the epoxy resin was a piece of cake because I had that in these little pump containers, so I could just pump out the proportions I needed in the cups and mix it up. The polyester gel coat I used on the roof just came in these quart cans, and I'm only mixing up 8 ounces of this at a time. So I had to scoop it out of these cans and get it in the measuring cup, and it was terrible to do because it was so stinky and it was so messy. Well, for this round, I'm now buying the gel coat by the gallon because they come with these plastic caps, and all I did was I just took a little scratch awl and punched it through the top there, and then I can just take this gallon and just pour it into my measuring cup until I get my 8 ounces. And then for the MEK, the hardener, I bought this measuring container, which is, it has a graduated cylinder on the top, and you just squeeze this until you get the amount you need, and then you just pour that into your mixing container, which is a lot easier. So that right there has made mixing the gel coat, and it'll also work for the polyester resin, much easier. And then when I was doing it all before, for some reason I was mixing it all by hand, and this time I made a little mixer out of some welding wire, and so I've been mixing it with that, which is also much easier. Okay guys, now you just saw me make this panel. It's actually been a couple of days since then, but if you can see, there's just a little bit of a texture on here, which I don't really care. I mean, I guess if it was up to me, I would rather have this be completely smooth and glossy, but it kind of gives it a leathery look or a vinyl look, which is fine because you couldn't have this on an exterior body panel, but for just a bulkhead panel, this is fine. It'll look good. Since I made these panels, I measured out the size that I need here, and then I just trimmed the edges of this panel to fit right on here. And I just did that outside with my table saw. I would never do that inside because there was a lot of dust and stuff, but dude, I just did it out in the backyard. It wasn't too bad. So this is ready to go. It's the exact size that I need, just a little bit smaller than the exact dimensions here so that it sits inside a little tiny bit. And I've already prefabbed some brackets to go on there. I just made 4 of these. I'm going to put 1 on each corner, and it's just really a little 45 piece with a 5/16 nut welded on the backside. And I'm going to use the same little fender washers that I used on the fiberglass front end because these hold the fiberglass very secure, but they also allow it to float around in here a little bit so that it's not as stressful on the fiberglass if the chassis is actually flexing a little bit. And then I made a little wooden jig that I can use just to clamp this up in the corners. And then I'll clamp these pieces on here and then just tack weld them in place. And then once I have those in place, I'll put the panel up here. I'll mark the holes, I'll drill the holes, and then I'm gonna actually put a little piece of like interior carpet on here just to soften it up a little bit. And then at that point it'll be done, and I'll pull the camera back out and we will check it out. So guys, now I have the panel on here. I'm really happy with it. It's very solid, it's very strong. I told you I was going to do one layer of the 8-ounce chopped strand mat, CSM they call it, but I actually did 2, which is actually quite a bit. It's pretty thick. This is at least an 1/8 inch thick. When I initially just laid 1, it really didn't seem strong enough, and this panel in particularly does receive a lot of hits of gravel from the front tire, at least on Mahler it does. So I decided I wanted to make this pretty strong just because I don't want anything really coming through there while I'm driving. Now I've got some good practice with the polyester resin, and I'm actually really happy with it. Actually, the only downside to the polyester resin is the stink. It smells horrible. I try to do as much of that work outside as I can. It smells so bad I can't even understand where that stink comes from. It will stink up this entire garage and somehow magically work its way into the house so bad that my wife will come outside and say, "Oh my God, that stinks, what are you doing?" So the smell of it is horrible. I'll try to do as much of it as possible outside, but it's pretty easy to work with. It seems pretty strong. I didn't have any real issues with it. I showed you how I mix it. I can actually mix it really fast and really easy now. A lot easier than when I was doing the epoxy, and the epoxy itself wasn't that hard, but the polyester was easier. So one thing that you might be wondering is, why did I make these panels out of fiberglass rather than just do aluminum paneling like I did on Mahler? The aluminum paneling would actually be a little bit lighter and it would be quicker and easier. But let me show you why I went this route. Mahler actually has a real nice aluminum paneling on his bulkhead. There's actually 2 problems with this. Number 1, I made it a little bit more intricate than I should have. It kind of overlaps itself, and when you want to remove the panels, you have to remove certain panels in certain ways to get it off. And I've found that when I'm just doing maintenance or repairs or needing to get in there, it's quite a process to take all of those off to get the panel off that you want. Pay attention on Wratchet, you'll see that I'm making, at least as much as possible, I'm making each panel completely independent of the other panels So at any time, if you're working on something, if you need to take one panel off, you should be able to take that panel off without needing to take another panel off just to gain access to it. The second issue with Mahler's panels is they are made out of aluminum. They're fairly thin, they're 050 aluminum, and when you're going down the trail and gravel is hitting these, which it does quite a bit, inside the cab it sounds like a rattle can. It's really loud and it's very tingy. So on Wratchet here, I went with fiberglass panels because they have more of a sound deadening to them. So if I tap on these panels, it's much, much, much quieter. And to quiet it down even more, I glued carpet on the backside, and the carpet does a couple of things. Number one, it quiets things down a little bit more. Number two, it's just going to look good. It looks a little hack right now because none of that steel that you see is painted. But when that steel is painted black and you see the gray carpet there, and I've got the black seats, it's actually going to be relatively nice in here. It's going to, you know, I'm trying to make it have a little bit of an inviting interior, which sounds kind of dumb on a Baja, but why the heck wouldn't I want to build this and make the interior as nice as possible while it's still being totally functional? Another thing that the carpet did is, you notice this panel sits just a little bit on the outside of the tubing. This carpet acts kind of like a gasketing around all of this, so it helps seal it, and it makes it so that, remember, there's a bar that runs through here. With the carpet, you're not going to have an issue with the panel vibrating and rattling off of that bar, because it's not actually secured to that support through there. It's just because it's all carpeted, it's kind of like absorbing that tube, and it's not going to make any rattling or anything. So there's a lot of reasons I went this way, and they are a little bit heavier, I'll admit to that, and I don't like doing things that add weight to the vehicle, but they're just a little bit heavier. But I think the pros far outweigh me just making them aluminum. So, you know, so far I'm real happy with them. I need to make a panel up here, and then I need to make some smaller panels to fill in all the voids down here. But I'm going to make them the exact same way. I'm going to make them out of this black gel coat, and it'll be the exact same thing. So I'll seal up this whole front section, or bulkhead, whatever you want to call it. So that's it for this video, guys. Hopefully this is helping you with whatever you're working on. There's a lot of people that are asking fiberglass questions, so I'm trying to make these videos and tell you how I'm doing it to a certain extent and give you the products that I'm using. I will have in the description of this video links for the resin and the gel coat and some of the stuff I used in making this fiberglass, so that if you guys are trying to do it yourself, you can see what I'm working with. Other than that, thanks for watching the video, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Take care.